Today, we're cracking open a case. It's a history lesson, sure, but it reads more like a true crime story. We're talking about what might just be the single biggest financial heist in all of human history. And yeah, that title? The numbers are absolutely staggering.
Think about it like this. Someone comes to your house, but they don't break down the door. They're friendly. They offer to, help manage your finances, and you let them. Then, for the next 200 years, they just siphon everything. Your savings, your income, your future. And when they finally pack up and leave, they turn around and say, "Look at all the good we did for you. We civilized you." Well, this isn't just a metaphor. According to some pretty groundbreaking research, this is the story of Britain in India.
So, before we get into the how of the heist, we gotta understand the what. What exactly was taken? So let's rewind the clock a bit. What was India actually like before the British really took over?
Well, in the 18th century, India wasn't some poor, underdeveloped place. Not at all. It was a global economic juggernaut. I mean, get this. It accounted for a full 25% of the entire world's GDP. A quarter of everything made and sold on the planet came from India. It was an absolute powerhouse.
The next 200 years were, well, just devastating. India went from that 25% powerhouse, exporting to the world, to a nation with just 3% of world GDP by the time the British left. Its economy was systematically taken apart, turning it from a world-class producer into a captive market for British factories.
So how on earth did this happen? You know, the craziest part is, this whole story doesn't begin with a king or an army invading. It begins with a company, a corporation that became one of the most powerful and ruthless in history, the East India Company.
It started out innocently enough. Back in 1600, just a trading firm looking for spices. But fast forward about 150 years, and it was a completely different beast. It had its own private army, an army that was bigger than Britain's official one. And then in 1765, it pulled off the ultimate corporate takeover. It got the right to collect taxes from 200 million people. Its one and only mission? Profit. And let's just pause on that for a second. A private company, not a government, had the authority to tax an entire subcontinent. Think about the most powerful tech giants today. They're powerful for sure, but they don't have private armies, and they definitely don't have the right to tax you. This was a whole different level of corporate power.
Okay, so this brings us right to the core of it all, the how done it. How did they actually manage to drain the wealth of a nation so completely? It wasn't just about brute force. It was a sophisticated and, frankly, a genius, in a very evil way, financial trick.
So here's how the magic trick worked. Step 1. Indian producers are exporting all this incredible stuff all over the world. They're earning a ton of foreign money, gold, silver, the good stuff. Step 2. Now normally, that money would flow right back into India's economy. But nope. Instead, the exporters were paid with these special paper IOUs from London called council bills. Step 3. To actually get their money, they had to take these pieces of paper to the colonial treasury in India. And now, for the final twist, Step 4. The treasury paid them using the tax money it had just collected from the Indian people.
You see the scam. India does all the work, earns all the money from its exports, but that money never actually gets to India. Britain pockets all the foreign currency for itself. Meanwhile, India is forced to pay its own businesses with its own tax money. It's like you sell your car and your neighbor keeps the cash, but you have to pay yourself for it out of your own savings. It wasn't trade. It was a financial vacuum cleaner. And this scheme ran for nearly 200 years, year in and year out. Recently, economists have painstakingly gone through 2 centuries of tax records and trade data to figure out just how much was taken. They've calculated the total bill. So, after all that time, compounding year after year, what does it all add up to in today's money? What was the final price tag for the greatest heist in history? $45 trillion. Let that number just sit there for a second. It's a figure so large it's almost impossible to comprehend. And the researchers who calculated it, they say that's a conservative estimate. To try and put that in perspective, with $45 trillion, you could fund NASA's entire budget for the next 18,000 years. You could end extreme global poverty 45 times over. You could buy the entire economy of the United Kingdom today 15 times over. It is an almost unimaginable amount of wealth.
But look, these huge numbers can feel abstract. This story isn't just about money. This heist had a devastating, real-world, human cost. The policy was always profit over people, and the consequences were just catastrophic.
India's world-famous textile industry was systematically wiped out.
Weavers were forced into these horrible contracts. There are historical accounts of silkwinders who, in an act of pure desperation, would cut off their own thumbs just so they couldn't be forced to work for the company anymore. Can you imagine that level of suffering?
And then there were the famines. The Great Bengal Famine of 1770 alone killed up to 10 million people. Tens of millions more died in famine after famine over the next couple of centuries. But here's the kicker. These were not simply natural disasters.
Even as millions of people were literally starving to death, records show that British officials continued to export huge amounts of food and grain out of India. Why? Because it was profitable. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't negligence. It was a direct, calculated result of a policy that valued British profits over Indian lives.
So where did that $45 trillion go? It didn't just disappear. It became the foundation of the British Empire. It fueled the industrialization of the entire Western world.
Let's be specific. This wealth directly funded Britain's Industrial Revolution. It paid for Britain's invasion of China during the Opium Wars. It was used to suppress the Indian Rebellion of 1857. And it helped bankroll the expansion of capitalism, not just in Europe, but in places like Canada and Australia. In a very real way, the modern world we live in was built with this capital.
But the true loss wasn't just the money. It was the stolen potential. It was the hospitals that were never built, the universities that were never funded, the generations born into a poverty that was manufactured. Britain didn't just take India's wealth, it took what India could have become.
When India finally gained independence in 1947, it was left impoverished, its industries shattered, and its people scarred. So the next time you hear the argument that colonialism brought development and built modern India, this whole story gives us a final powerful question we can ask. Built it for whom?